Whether it's a Trump or Biden presidency, the Congressional Progressive Caucus appears to be getting their house in order. 100 members strong, the caucus wants to become a lean and formidable opponent to push through some progressive ideals in 2021.
And according to his new piece in The Intercept, Ryan Grim says the leadership structure and how the caucus does business in general is set to change. D.C. Bureau Chief of The Intercept and host of the Deconstructed podcast, Ryan Grim, is here to tell us all about it. Great to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Ryan.
Good. Yeah, good to see you.
So just lay out what they have planned here, Ryan, and why they're making these changes.
So, when the Progressive Caucus was first founded back in 1991, actually by Bernie Sanders and four other progressive Democrats, like he was an independent at the time, they didn't really have to put up guardrails around the caucus, because nobody really wanted to be called a progressive. So the thinking was that if you're willing to be part of this caucus, then you must be an actual progressive. There's just no other reason, no other benefit for you to be in it. That's not the case anymore. Now, calling yourself a progressive has serious electoral advantages back in your district. And so over the last decade or so, you've seen the size of the caucus grow significantly. But you haven't seen its power grow significantly, and you haven't seen it become a significant organizing force. A lot of them, the meetings of the CPC would often have just a handful of members of Congress there. So while you had 100 members, it wasn't like you had 100 people who were active as part of it. And there was also no way to enforce discipline on members to say that, okay, we are all going to withhold our votes on this bill on the floor unless we get X, Y, or Z. There was really no way to effectuate that kind of a strategy. There was really no buy-in among membership that was even what the caucus was for. Back in 2009, Raul Grijalva, who was the co-chair of it, described it to me as a glorified reading group. They would meet every couple of weeks and talk about Noam Chomsky, but there was no real agenda that they were able to accomplish.
So, Ryan, what's going on in terms of the changes to the structure? There's no secret, it hasn't been a particularly effectual caucus during these stimulus negotiations. As far as I know, the only member to even speak out and try to urge Nancy Pelosi to take the deal was Ro Khanna, and even he had to walk that back slightly. I mean, how are they going to operate within these dynamics if it's a Biden administration or a Trump administration?
Well, the top line structural change that they're making is one that's just trying to make it a leaner and faster organization, and that's taking it from a co-chair situation to a single chair. Almost every other caucus on Capitol Hill, whether it's the New Democrats or the Blue Dogs, have a single chair. Blue Dogs have kind of a co-chair set up, but there's one leading co-chair who basically runs the organization. And speed on Capitol Hill is essential. Things move extremely quickly, and if you take all day to let leadership know what your demands are or to get your demands out into the press, by the time they get there, the negotiations are over and the ship has sailed, and you've lost your opportunity to even weigh in. And so that's one tweak that they're making that rankled some people, particularly Jamie Raskin, who was hoping to run for co-chair with Pramila Jayapal. Now there won't be a co-chair spot, so he could still potentially run for a vice chair position, which is going to have some elevated responsibility. But the bigger question was, how are we going to enforce discipline? And so the caucus is setting up a system where they will take whip counts, they'll take votes on issues, bills, votes on the floor, and if 2/3 of the Progressive Caucus support a particular measure, then everyone else in the caucus is required to vote as a block, either yes or no, whatever the push by the CPC is. However, you're only required to do that 2/3 of the time. So in other words, you get a hall pass one out of every 3 times. So the question will be, how strictly do they enforce this discipline? What are the consequences for people who stray? And are there going to be any significant carrots or sticks beyond straight up kind of expulsion from the caucus that could work to enforce that discipline.
And so how large do you expect the caucus to actually be once because part of the goal here is like, let's trim this down to the people who are actually progressive and represent, consistent set of progressive values. Because right now you have nonsensical situations like people who are in the problem solvers caucus, which is this, sort of centrist corporatist caucus, and also in the progressive caucus, which doesn't actually make any sense. How large do you think the caucus will be after these reforms? And then do you think that this is a serious signal to the Biden administration that they're going to be, more aggressive and frankly more willing to criticize Democratic leadership than what we've seen so far?
Because CPC members are able to take a walk, that's the phrase, that's one of the phrases that they use on Capitol Hill. To say that you're not going to be with a caucus on a particular issue usually means you don't vote. You just kind of take a walk and don't show up. Or the other phrase is hall pass. If you get a hall pass and you're kind of forgiven for an apostasy on a particular issue because members are allowed to have 1 out of 3 of those on any particular issue. I don't think it's going to shrink that much. Because I think most members who are even in the problem solvers caucus or are in the New Dems would look at that and say, I can do that. I can be with them 2/3 of the time. Now, the attendance requirement will be interesting. New Dems and problem solver caucus types aren't the ones that really want to spend time kind of organizing with progressives and going to these meetings. So I suspect that a lot of them will not show up for these meetings. So then the question becomes, do they actively boot these people out of the caucus? And we'll see. There's supposed to be a whip. There will be an election for who the whip is, and it'll be up to that whip to then say, okay, look, you haven't been showing up. You're not really a part of this caucus. We're kicking you out. The other question will be, how big is the House Democratic majority? Because paradoxically, if they add another 10 or 20 Democrats to their ranks, then progressives need that many more people to hold the line in order to influence Nancy Pelosi's calculus. If she has a padded majority where she can lose 30 votes, then if 25 progressives come to her and say, we're not with you on this issue, she'll say, well, gee, that's too bad. Right. I'm ramming it through anyway.
So basically, if they're impotent, then she won't care anyway.
Right.
If she has the votes anyway and doesn't need them, then they can do whatever they want.
She has the votes.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Ryan, always great to have your analysis on this. Thank you.
You got it.
Next on Rising, the Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, he's going to discuss a unique approach to repairing an economy that's been wrecked by COVID, legalization of recreational marijuana. That when Rising continues.